In 2021, investigators at Rikers Island discovered something unusual in the George R. Vierno Center, an inmate ledger. It wasn't a hit list or a commissary log. It was a budget. Inside, itemized entries for cigarettes, phone time, protection payments, and CO fees. CO meaning correction officers. The ledger revealed a parallel economy, one that ran beneath the state's control. Each dorm had its own governing gang, each gang had its own tax system, and every dollar that moved through that ecosystem was sanctioned by both inmate hierarchy and staff complicity. That ledger, smuggled out by a whistleblower, was evidence of what insiders already knew. Rikers Island isn't governed by the Department of Correction. It's ruled by two rival powers, the gang kingpins and the COs. And they're not opposites. They're business partners. This is not a story about individual corruption or isolated brutality. It's a story of dual sovereignty, two governments coexisting in the same territory, each with its own code, army, and economy. For decades, Rikers Island has been portrayed as chaotic, an unmanageable facility spiraling into dysfunction. But chaos is only the surface. Beneath it lies a system of negotiated power, where gangs and guards balance violence and cooperation to maintain control. In this film, we'll explore Rikers as a political battlefield, not between inmates and officers, but between rival states within the same walls. This is the gang kingpins versus the COs, the shadow war for control of Rikers Island. To understand Rikers, you must understand its design. The island spans 413 acres, connected to Queens by a single bridge. Within that space sit 10 jails, each a fiefdom with its own command structure. The architecture was never built for order. It was built for containment. Blind corners, narrow corridors, and decentralized modular layouts make supervision nearly impossible. In 2014, the U.S. Department of Justice described Rikers as a place where disorder and violence are normalized. But what that report didn't say, and perhaps couldn't say, is that this disorder serves a purpose. The modern power struggle inside Rikers began in the early 1990s. Crack-era arrests filled the jails to bursting, over 20,000 detainees by 1993. With overcrowding came opportunity. Street gangs like the Bloods, Crips, and Trinitarios began organizing inside. They brought with them the social order of the streets, rank, territory, taxation. But confinement transformed those hierarchies into something new: political institutions. Meanwhile, correction officers, overworked, underpaid, and emboldened by their union, the Correction Officers Benevolent Association (COBA), developed their own parallel network of control. The COBA's power was absolute. Even city officials were hesitant to confront them. In 1986, when officers staged an illegal strike, they literally barricaded the bridge to Rikers, sealing in thousands of inmates and staff. The city surrendered to their demands. That day, the COs learned they could defy City Hall. The inmates learned that no one from the outside was coming to help. The stage was set for an internal Cold War. By the late 1990s, Rikers functioned through mutual governance. Officers controlled movement, gangs controlled morale. The unspoken agreement was simple. If the inmates kept violence contained, meaning no large-scale riots or CO injuries, they would be left to manage internal affairs. In 2009, a city investigation revealed that officers routinely allowed house gangs, inmate crews tasked with maintaining order, to operate with impunity. These gangs extorted weaker detainees, enforced discipline, and distributed commissary. It was illegal, unethical, and effective. For a time, Rikers ran smoothly because the gangs were running it. From 2010 onward, a combination of political scandal, budget cuts, and moral panic eroded formal oversight. Mayor Bloomberg's administration prioritized optics, cutting rehabilitation programs while inflating security budgets. At the same time, smartphones and contraband cameras began leaking footage to the public. COs beating restrained inmates, dorms awash in chaos, detainees living in filth. To preserve their image, DOC leadership began a quiet policy of camera management. Blind spots, literally and administratively, multiplied. By 2014, when the DOJ published its scathing report, both gangs and officers had adapted. Each faction operated like a government, maintaining control through coercion, loyalty, and information. The war was no longer fought with shanks. It was fought through networks. Inside Rikers there are two kinds of authority. The officer government, top-down, union-protected, bureaucratically shielded. The gang government, horizontal, enforced through violence, sustained through economy. Both rely on fear, both rely on loyalty, and both profit from instability. Between them lies the average detainee, caught between two constitutions that never agreed to coexist. The result is a prison that functions more like a failed state than a correctional facility. Every political system depends on an economy. At Rikers, that economy revolves around contraband, cigarettes, drugs, cell phones, commissary goods, and influence. Smuggling operations are sophisticated. In some cases, inmates pay officers directly. In others, officers collect taxes from gang intermediaries to ensure certain dorms remain comfortable. In 2020, internal investigators intercepted a message between two COs coordinating delivery schedules for contraband cigarettes. One text read simply, "Southside has it this week, North gets next." It was an allocation system, a cartel agreement between factions of staff and inmates. The economy ensures mutual benefit. Gangs maintain profit and loyalty among their members. Officers reduce chaos by delegating internal discipline. Administrators report reduced incidents. Everyone wins except the law. Rikers gangs are not anarchic. They are bureaucratic entities with rank, territory, and conflict resolution protocols. At the top sit program houses, dorms where leadership resides. Officers know who runs each house. They often rely on those leaders to keep the peace. As one retired CO told the city in 2021, "You pick your captain, your inmate captain. You let him run it and you make sure the paperwork stays clean." The result is a network of informal treaties, fragile truces that shift with personnel changes or gang disputes. When those treaties break down, the violence returns, swift, targeted, and often with officer complicity. The triangle of power. The relationship between COs, gang leaders, and administrators can be diagrammed as a triangle. Gang leaders control the base, enforcing discipline through fear and hierarchy. COs maintain the perimeter, deciding who moves, who eats, who breathes. Administrators maintain plausible deniability, citing safety concerns to avoid intervention. Information flows upward, blame flows downward. In 2017, a leaked internal memo from the DOC's Intelligence Division described consistent evidence of gang staff coordination in managing dorm populations. The memo concluded that complete eradication of gang control is operationally unrealistic. That is bureaucratic language for surrender. In 2018, an internal whistleblower revealed that several dorms within the Anna M. Cross Center were being run directly by Blood and Trinitario leadership. COs allowed gang spokesmen to hold nightly meetings, distribute commissary, and decide which inmates were transferred. In return, those dorms experienced fewer recorded assaults, a metric the DOC leadership used to justify progress. One investigator described it as delegated governance. Another called it a shadow city. What began as an efficiency measure evolved into a parallel bureaucracy. While the gangs operate on loyalty and fear, the COs operate on unionized impunity. COBA, led for years by Norman Seabrook, wielded political power on par with police unions. When Seabrook was arrested in 2016 for accepting kickbacks in a federal corruption case, investigators uncovered decades of political influence, campaign donations, lobbying, and preferential contracts. Within Rikers, that translated to near total autonomy. Officers rarely faced discipline for brutality or collusion. Internal affairs investigations were chronically underfunded. By 2022, nearly one-third of Rikers' uniformed staff was on sick leave or modified duty. The few who remained created overtime empires, some earning over $250,000 a year. The less control the DOC had, the more profitable the chaos became. The relationship between gangs and officers thrives on controlled chaos. When fights break out, COs can justify lockdowns, overtime pay, shift extensions, hazard bonuses. When peace returns, gangs reap profits through commissary sales and protection rackets. Both sides benefit from the illusion of ungovernability. One former DOC investigator described it bluntly in a 2021 deposition. If Rikers ever actually got fixed, half the island would lose their hustle. This shadow war isn't fought with ideology, it's fought with incentives. Between these two powers lies the silent majority, detainees with no gang affiliation and officers with no appetite for corruption. They are the civilians of this war. In 2023, a detainee named Christopher Bautista testified to the Board of Correction that he was beaten by gang members in full view of officers. When he begged for help, a CO told him, "Handle your business like a man." He did, and was placed in solitary for fighting. The system punishes neutrality. At Rikers there is no Switzerland. By 2021, federal monitors reported that the Department of Correction had lost control of the jails. Gangs determined who worked which dorms. Officers picked assignments based on relationships, not order. The DOC's leadership publicly insisted it was implementing reform. Privately, monitors warned that Rikers had become an autonomous zone. In essence, the island was no longer governed by the city, but by its own internal warlords. The more the system fails, the more it costs. In 2023, the city spent an estimated $556,000 per detainee per year, the highest incarceration cost in the world. Yet the infrastructure crumbled. Ceilings collapsed, mold spread, and food shortages became routine. Where did the money go? Into overtime, union contracts, and settlements, the bureaucratic spoils of disorder. The shadow war isn't ideological, it's fiscal. Rikers is a battlefield fought over profit margins, not principles. The result of this prolonged conflict is moral entropy. In 2022, 19 detainees died in custody, most awaiting trial. Some overdosed on smuggled fentanyl. Others hung themselves after days of isolation. Each death was recorded as an incident. Each incident was explained away as unforeseeable. But for those inside, nothing was unforeseeable. The violence was the system, not a flaw in it. In mid-2023, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams moved to place Rikers under federal receivership, effectively stripping New York City of control. He stated bluntly, "The city has proven that it cannot govern Rikers Island. If successful, it would mark the first time a major American jail was placed under direct federal management. But even that may not solve the problem. Receivership changes the bureaucracy, not the culture. The gangs and COs will simply adapt to the new regime. The story of Rikers is the story of state failure in miniature. When institutions retreat, culture fills the void. When law loses legitimacy, order becomes transactional. The gang leaders and correction officers are not villains in isolation. They are the inheritors of a broken system. Each operates according to rational self-interest within a structure that rewards survival over justice. What Rikers reveals, in its bleakest clarity, is that the American penal system has become a federation of microstates, each one negotiating its own peace. If this sounds like a thriller, it's because it is. There are factions, informants, double agents, and shifting alliances, all within 1 square mile of landfill. But unlike a film, there's no resolution. The war doesn't end, it just reorganizes. One retired DOC captain summarized it best. Every few years the names change, but the game stays the same. The gangs need us. We need them. The city needs both of us to pretend it's under control. That's not governance. That's détente. What does it mean when the state's most fortified institution becomes a marketplace? When power itself is privatized, traded between the captors and the captured? If the line between criminal and warden dissolves completely, does the concept of justice still exist? Rikers Island is often described as a failure. But perhaps it's something worse, a success for the logic that built it. A self-sustaining system where corruption is currency, and chaos is governance. The gangs and the COs are not enemies. They're the twin governments of an empire the public no longer controls. Thank you for watching. The search for truth continues.